Hey, Chris,
Hey, Rod.
got a question for you.
Oh, yeah?
Yep. What do you do when in your life you lose a child at a young age
Yeah.
and later you lose your husband? How do you handle that grief,
Oof.
that level?
I don't know. But lucky enough, we've got a guest today that can help us find that out.
Hey, this is Rod.
And this is Chris.
We are Unqualified
And Unsupervised.
the show where two guys try to figure out life after loss with no experts, no scripts, just experience.
We're going to have the unfiltered conversations about hard topics that no one wants to talk about, but everyone should. Coming from a couple of guys who were forced to join a club we didn't want to join.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah, Rod.
how you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
You had a good week?
I had a really good week.
Good.
Actually. Yeah.
I'm glad. I had a lot of funerals this week.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
I guess it helps the paycheck.
it kind of does. It does. They were the one funeral was the landlord that I rent from. She passed away. She had been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer and bone cancer about 2.5 months ago.
Oh, geez.
And then she passed away. And then another gentleman here in town who is pretty well known, he passed away too suddenly. So it was a great, I guess pleasure maybe isn't the right word, but
yeah, probably not. But
it was great honor. It was a great
as we've heard
honor
from other guests
to help these
honor.
people through their grief and their services.
Yep,
And
exactly.
so, but tonight or today, we have a friend of mine, Caroline, joining us from Colorado. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I am too.
I was trying to do the math. I'm trying to think of when we met. I think Barry was about 2 years old, and he's now 42. So I have a feeling that
Okay, come on, get the math. So
I think it's 40 years.
Puts it right about in there someplace.
40
doesn't
years
it?
that
Yeah.
we've
Good for
known
you.
each other, and so I met Caroline. We were visiting Boston, and my now ex-wife and I traveled down to Cape Cod, and we took a train. And we didn't want to take the train back. So we were looking at the bus station, and I saw this woman come and go. She walked out. And the next thing, this woman is standing next to us, like, can I help you? I couldn't help but overhear you. You know, it's your
Sure.
first time to Cape Cod. So we told her the story.
Are you? You're not from around here, are you?
Not really, no. And so anyway, she was very kind, gave us a ride to a car rental place. And in the car ride, she said, well, if you have no place to stay, you know, you're welcome to come join my husband and me and come and stay at our house tonight.
Wow.
And my wife, she's like, oh, yeah, that'd be great. Like, okay, this could be a serial killer.
Right?
You know.
There should be a little trepidation.
Yeah, just a
in
little
that.
bit like hesitation there. Anyway, come to find out that Henry and Caroline were not serial killers. They were actually very wonderful
Really?
people, and we did stay with them several times. We took Barry to visit them and on their lovely home out on Cape Cod. And it was a wonderful experience. And
Fabulous.
I'm glad we're friends and all these years. And she has a wonderful story about the loss of her, well, not she has her story. She has her
Yes.
story about the
Yeah.
loss of her child and the loss of her husband, Henry.
Right, and her story in dealing with that.
Yes. And how do you survive that?
It's a very interesting story.
And how you find love again after that, how you
Right.
come up out of the ashes of that. So
right?
we can just dive in.
Let's do that.
Caroline, welcome to our show.
Welcome.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, what is your memory of us meeting?
Oh, this should be
A
good.
little different than yours, Rod. It was actually my husband, and he was supposed to be getting a flight to DC, but I thought it was at the airport, and they were fogged in, and they canceled all the flights. And somewhere, maybe it was in the rental car area or whatever, he met you and Anne, and you had no place to go. So he called me and he said, oh, I'm bringing people home tonight, which wasn't unusual.
Oh, my funny. That's funny.
And I think at that time, my memory was that Barry was around 7 or 8. I think you brought him back the next year and he was 9.
When we came to visit you, he was about that age. Yes.
Yeah.
That trip was wild.
It sounds like it.
It was. But Henry was a writer and very fascinated about the books that he wrote. I'm not sure how many did he write?
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I have to count.
Okay.
A
Okay.
number.
So
Number.
what types of things did he write?
Well, he wrote one novel, and mostly he was very good at wrapping his arms around a vast quantity of information and making it easily understandable for the layperson. So he did that for a lot of banks and airlines and insurance companies in their in-house magazines, brochures, and things. But then he, in college, had been told he really should write books, and so I can't remember how he got an agent in New York, and he wrote on aerospace. He wrote on medicine. A lot of interesting stories related to that.
The one was
on,
United Fruit
and on whistleblowers. He wrote a couple of books on whistleblowers.
I have a copy of that, and I have a copy of the United Fruit.
Yes.
That was fascinating.
Yes.
United Fruit owned like Chiquita Bananas,
right.
Foster Grant sunglasses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that corporation.
Yeah.
Pretty fascinating stuff.
Okay.
And Caroline.
Sorry.
No, Caroline nails it.
I think his IQ was 183, and he'd done Harvard in 2 years with honors, and won the Bell Prize for Literature. And he just, was a brainiac. But he
and yet he got along with Rod.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. I never felt stupid around him, because it would be easy to do that. But no, he was so good about that. He just brought you along with whatever he was doing.
Sure.
Which is definitely a gift. So, Caroline, you have children.
Yes. I had a son, and then I had a daughter, Jenny. She died when she was almost 2, and then I had another daughter. And then when I met and married Henry, so that marriage ended. We moved to Cape Cod in an effort to save it, which changing locations doesn't. And when I left England, I was only 19 years old. And my mother said to me, whatever you do, wherever you go, find a church. I don't care what it is. They're good people. Everyone wonders, who am I? Where did I come from? Why am I here? And where am I going? And they will become your friends and family. So that's what I did wherever I lived, and I do now. And I, met Henry in church one day. And I'm sort of a friendly sort, and he was there with his 2 little girls who were more or less the same age as my children. And I said, well, come for coffee. And after talking to him, I thought, well, you're really smart, And there's a long story, which I won't go into now because it doesn't really have anything to do with grief. But
the door's open. We can do that another time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really a funny story. About how he tracked me down.
But
and proposed to me 5 days after we went out for dinner.
5 days.
Yes, and I said yes, but by the way, our children haven't met yet. So I said, if it's still the same in 2 years, I'll consider it. So that's what we did.
Oh my, that's a great story. That's a great story. So tell us about your daughter. You found her.
Yeah, we were living in an beautiful old Victorian house in the New Jersey countryside. And I had just started going to church because I thought I should put my kids in Sunday school. We'd only lived there for 6 months. And she was running a low fever, and I'd taken her to the pediatrician, and he gave me some antibiotics, which they later said probably could have arrested the development of what she died from. She couldn't speak. She was 22 months old, so she couldn't really tell me if anything was bothering her. And 3 days later, I went to wake her up from her nap, and she was dead. And and my son he'd run up before me, and he turned to me and he said, "Mommy, Jenny has a blue mouth, so she must have been dead a couple of hours." Anyway, I tried to revive her, and so did the rescue squad, and that was that. And 2 weeks later, my son started preschool, So there I was sitting alone in the middle of the countryside. I mean, we had 3 acres. Neighbor across the street had 58. Behind us had 200. You know, I could have screamed bloody murder and no one would have heard me.
Sure.
And I was just desperately, desperately lonely. And the priest at the Episcopal Church that I'd been going to, you know, he was wonderful and came over immediately. And it was just my then husband, who was a heavy drinker, and his first wife had died in a car accident, and he was so mad at God. He said every time he comes up for air, God's there with a hammer to hit him on the head. And he wouldn't speak to me for 3 days because he was angry.
Wow.
And so there I sat. You know, my family's all in Europe. I didn't have many friends because we'd only just moved there. And I was desperately, desperately lonely.
Wow.
And wept my way through my journal for the next year. And I did have a profound spiritual experience 5 years later, which I don't know if it's pertinent to this.
Well, do you want to give us a flavor of it?
And if you want to cut it and do it another time. But so, you know, I'm British, and we're very good at keeping a stiff upper lip and carrying on, right? I mean, which is basically exactly what I realized I did. And I never really fully absorbed the grief. And about 5 years after she died, we decided to move to Cape Cod in an effort to save the marriage. And we had buried her ashes in a little box by a rock in the garden where she used to play. And I couldn't face digging up the box. I couldn't face leaving it there. And I didn't know what to do. So I went over to the church to find the main minister, and he wasn't there. And then we had this wonderful young guy in his 30s who, at the height of an LSD trip, had seen God and gone home and told his family he was going into the ministry, and they all fell on the floor laughing. But he had an absolutely wonderful gift with young people. But he was there, and he said, well, why don't you, talk to me? And I said, no, I'll come back next week. He said, no, come on. And he had this office in a turret in this old stone church in New Jersey. And I told him my problem, and he just looked at me in the eyes and pointed his finger at me, shaking it, and said, you haven't accepted the fact that your daughter's dead. He said, did you ever tell anyone exactly what happened the day she died? And I said, no, my husband wouldn't speak to me. And so he said, well, why don't you tell me now? And I said, I can't. It's too painful. And he said, well, lay on the couch and close your eyes. And so I did. He said, but you're forgetting one thing. You weren't alone. Spirit was with you. Jesus was with you, whatever you want to call it. You were not alone. So he said, I want you to imagine that you're sitting in your living room and you're having afternoon tea with Jesus, and he's wearing a business suit. And immediately in my mind's eye, it was like I was watching a movie, and I said, oh no, we're in the kitchen, we're having coffee. He's got blue jeans and sandals and curly dark hair and tan skin. And I could see this person who really, I guess, looked a lot like Jesus probably did, not like this one European that they usually paint him to be. And he said, now I want you to take Jesus with you to wake Jenny up from her nap. And I said, I can't. I can't. And he said, you can. And he just kept encouraging. And he said, so I walked through the living room and I got to the bottom of the stairs, and he said to me, is he still with you? And I said, yes. And I went up the stairs and stood outside her bedroom door. And he said, now, the minister said, now open the door. I said, I can't. Please don't make me do that. And he said, you must. So I opened the door and I went in, and the minister's name was Bob. And Bob said, is Jesus still there? And I said, yes. And I could turn, and it was like this figure was standing next to me with his hands both open. And Bob said, now pick Jenny up and give her to Jesus. And I screamed and I cried. And I said, please don't make me give my baby away, please. And he said, you must. So in my mind's eye, I picked her up and I laid her across Jesus's arms. And immediately it was like they started disappearing. And I thought, oh no, he's taking my baby away. And I was screaming. And Bob said, don't lose it. Tell me what's happening. And I said, oh, it was like they were up towards the ceiling in the room, you know,
Right.
I said, she's got her arms around his neck, her legs around his waist. She's got long blonde braids down to her waist, which she would have had she been 7 years old, not 2. I saw a 7-year-old girl.
Oh,
Interesting.
Yeah, which she would have been.
Oh, at that time, yes.
Yes.
That's
She died,
interesting.
and this was 5 years after her death.
Right.
Right. Okay.
This is my deduction. And
Sure.
I said, she's turned and she's looking at me. And Bob said, what's she doing? And I said, she's smiling. And he said to me, you see, she's alive. And in that moment, I can't tell you, it was like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders. And that night, fortunately, my husband was away on business in Russia, and we had a driving rainstorm. And I went out. I was able to dig the box up with ease, and I put it on the mantelpiece in my bedroom. And I lay there in bed at night, and I couldn't sleep. And every time I just had this amazing sense of peace. And every time I opened my eyes, there was this ball of fuzzy light in the upper corner of my bedroom. And I thought, I'm seeing things. And I closed my eyes for 10 minutes and quickly opened them, and it was still there. And I didn't sleep all night. I just lay there in a deep sense of peace. And that ball of light was there all night.
What did you think the ball of light was?
I just thought it was spirit or something, you know, a presence that just wanted to comfort me and be with me.
Wow. So
the next day he called me and told me, Bob called me and said, come on over, I want to see how you're doing. Because he said, you know, you have a void. You've let go of something that was, and, you know, he told me to go home and read the Psalms of Praise and the Gospel of John. And I opened my Bible, and it was like in neon lights, and the words of Jesus were like, oh my God, it was like he was talking directly to me, you know, come unto me, all you that travail and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. And he said, now you've had this profound experience. I want you to share it with the church. And I said, I can't do that. And he said, I know you can't. He said, I know you can't, but spirit can. He said, write it out. And when you come to church on Sunday, read it through 3 times and leave your notes behind, and spirit will give you the words. And I stood up. I was terrified of public speaking. I used to blush.
Oh, we all are.
You know.
Well, some of you are.
Yeah.
But go on. Yeah. Okay. So he's encouraging you to do this in church.
Yeah. And so I did what he said, and I stood and I spoke, and the whole church was in tears. And, you know, it was, I lost my fear of public speaking.
Wow.
In a moment. And then before that, if I was in a small group study or something, I'd blush to the roots if I had to speak.
Oh my, that's
Yeah.
Sure.
That's very profound.
And so, you know,
yeah.
with Jenny, it's like she's always with me. And I think one of the things I've realized is that I did start a grief group. I got involved with Compassionate Friends, which is an international group, nationwide group as well.
Compassionate Friends?
For parents of lost children.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I started 3 groups on Cape Cod and, you know, used to facilitate those. And I realized, because the one thing that I didn't have when Jenny died was somebody who could just come up and lay a hand on my shoulder and say, I know, I've been there, you know.
Right.
People got by with casseroles. They wanted to take me to the movies, do anything but talk about Jenny. I needed to talk about it.
This is, you're touching on something with Chris, because he in his own story, he said his friends would just come over. Sometimes they'd talk, sometimes they wouldn't. They would just be.
Just sit.
And you've touched on that, because, you know, after Jeff, sometimes I just needed to be, and I needed someone to be with, you know. Yeah. And that's so important as part of the process. And people don't do that. I think what they do is they fill their time with work and busyness, and they don't do it. But it sounds like you eventually did touch on like you got in touch with your feelings about it.
Well, I was, you know, through that, the help from that minister, it was really what set me free. And then I was actually the Eastern, I did a workshop at the Eastern Regional Conference of Compassionate Friends one year on the loss of a child. So the thing is, because of that, and because of sitting next to the man on the plane who didn't know, I realized that's how she lives on.
Right.
I wouldn't have had those experiences.
Do we want to go into
Right.
that story right now, Chris? Or
So-
did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to go back for a second when you're talking about someone touching your shoulder who knew what you went through because they had also lost a child.
Well, I didn't have anybody, though. That was the thing. That's what I needed.
Right. And then I guess I was going to say, in my experience, I had lots of people around me, but they didn't lose their spouse, and they didn't see what she went through. And so they didn't understand what I had actually gone through. And that's what I needed too, as well, was somebody who actually knew what I had experienced.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's a blessing when you do.
But,
right.
But going.
So I have a little place in the mountains for both my daughter and my husband, where I, go to sit with them on birthdays and anniversaries, and I feel their presence.
Yeah. And that's why we've told people too, it doesn't get easier, it just gets softer. And I do the very same thing with Jeff,
Yeah. It's like, I liken it to silt at the bottom of a pond.
Okay.
And sometimes it gets stirred up.
Yes, that's a great visual. Great.
To the surface.
Oh, I like that a lot.
I remember promising myself that if I could get through the day without crying, I would allow myself to have a good cry when I went to bed. In the process of grief, I just wept all the time initially, and then I managed to make the day go by. But I have felt Jenny's presence so many times, and always. I remember one time, I just went. It was her birthday. It was end of November, and I thought, I got to bed, and I thought, I haven't touched base with Jenny today. And I went out and stood on the brick porch of the house on Cape Cod, and I looked up at the sky, and I said, Jenny, where are you? And all of a sudden, the clouds parted, and there was one soft, fuzzy star. And I said, there you are. And I went back to bed.
Nice. She's there looking over you.
But there's a lot of signs like that. I'm going to bring you into the plane story, because we were talking about that before we came on, before we recorded.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about spiritual type things happening before, like we're in the right place at the right time for the right people. And that continues to happen. There's the serendipities around us all the time. And a friend of mine always referred to it like we need to be little satellite dishes for those incoming experiences. And you did share with us an experience that you had. I don't know where you were. You tell the story about the plane. Yeah.
Well, it started, my sister was getting married for the second time. She's been married a number of times, but I decided I would go to her wedding, and she's in England. And so I went, and it seemed like everywhere I went, everyone was just so glad I was there. My mother said, I couldn't have done it without you, dear. And, I took the train down to London to get the plane home and spent the night with a high school classmate. And I had this spiritual book of, I think it was The Road Less Traveled. I'm sure you probably read it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was exactly the book my friend needed. And she said, how did you know I needed that book? And it seemed everywhere I went, I was meant to be there. And so by the time I got to the airport to get my flight back to England, to the US, I just sat at the gate, and I just knew I was going to sit next to somebody. It would be meaningful. And I remember looking around and thinking, oh, gosh, I'm probably just going to sit next to a boring Englishman or something. And this, very unassuming looking guy, I was at the side of the plane where there's just two seats. I had the window, and he got on and sat next to me. And I was reading some kind of spiritual book. And we were going down the runway. It was a jumbo jet, and you know how long it takes for them to be airborne.
Yes.
Waiting and waiting. But he had just told me that he was at a conference in Sheffield in the north of England and had heard that his granddaughter had died of leukemia, and he was trying to make it home for the funeral. And he recounted all that, somebody handed him a credit card. He got to the airport and they said, oh, it's another £300. And he didn't have the money. And the guy just stamped his ticket and said, when he found out why he was trying to get home. And so he too had a sense that he was going to sit next to somebody.
Right.
And he just told me that part. And he said, I'm just trying to get home in time for the funeral. He said, and the trouble is, I am a minister. I have conducted funerals. I have sat next to people who are dying and seen them through a pass to the other side. But I don't know what it's like to lose a child. And at that moment, we were speeding down, and I knew then why I was sitting next to him. And we're speeding down the runway, and it seemed to be going forever before it's airborne. And there was an explosion on the plane, followed by another and another.
A what?
And
explosion.
An actual explosion. Kaboom, fire.
Yeah. And I thought we were almost ready to be airborne. It turned out we were 4 seconds from being airborne. I knew I hadn't said what I was going to say to this man yet. So I slipped my shoes off, put my head down, and thought we'll probably end up on our belly in the woods or something, And we had to absolute pandemonium on the plane. People climbing over, trying to get to the exits and shoving people out of the way. And I sat there with, I think it's one of the 2 times in my life where I think I've experienced the peace that passes understanding. I knew that I was going to get a chance to say what I had to say to this man. And I felt such peace. So we ended up sitting on the plane for an hour. It turned out one tire had blown, followed by another and another. And we had to go back to the terminal and wait 8 hours for another jumbo jet to come from India. And it wasn't until we got back on the plane that I shared with him the death of Jenny.
Okay.
And then about 3 weeks, I forgot about it, and about 3 weeks after, I got a package in the mail and a letter from the minister saying that apparently what I said was the most profound thing he ever heard. He preached a sermon in church on the events that led up to the 2 of us sitting next to each other. He sent me a recording of the sermon, which I still have.
Cool.
And letters from the mother of his granddaughter, from members in the congregation. I never saw him again. But it was just, and I facilitate a women's group at the church I go to is a unity church, which basically says whatever path you're on, it's fine.
Right.
But I facilitate a women's group, and I'm always telling them, if you allow the space for stuff to show up, it will. It's not like you say, I want a Cadillac. It's
right.
just like, you and I think that's what happened with sitting next to that. I felt it and I allowed the space for it to happen, and it showed up. And I've had a lot of other similar experiences like that.
So
wow.
So this Unity Church is in Boulder.
No, yes, it is.
And did they just have a minister retire?
Oh no, that's the main church. No, we went. I went to that for a while, but he was a little. 1 week he'd talk about aliens, and another crop circles, and then he thought the world was going to end, and he and his family disappeared into the mountains.
Oh.
So there's about a couple of hundred people who went to that church, decided it wasn't really for them, and they bought a piece of land also in Boulder, but a few miles away.
Oh, okay.
And started another one, and it's called Columbine Spiritual Center. It's a spiritual center.
Oh, okay.
You know what I love about that story is it everybody's going through their thing. Everybody's going through something. You don't know what that is. And if you just reach out with a little kindness once in a while and a little respect, you never know what kind of dominoes that's going to knock over.
Yes.
And how you're going to help somebody down the line that you didn't even know you knew, had any connection with. I love that.
And I think that's become my motto. The code I live by is just to extend love and kindness wherever I go.
Well, I think it's interesting because, we are put in people's paths and they're put in our path. And that's happened to me over and over and over. I mean, it's like, here we are stranded on Cape Cod. And the next thing you know, we're staying at a complete stranger's house,
Right?
I mean,
and now you're recording a podcast.
And now, like 40 years ago, if someone would have said, you're going to meet this person, and this is what's going to happen. You can't make it up. And literally,
no, that's a Hallmark movie.
That's a Hallmark movie. So
maybe we should make it.
so moving forward,
Yes.
you end this marriage, and you go on to find love again.
Yes.
And what's that story? How does that happen?
This is with Henry.
Yes.
So,
yes.
If you've got the time for the story, I don't know how much time you have, but
we got time.
So I was feeling down. I got a separation from we moved to Cape Cod. It didn't work, and I needed to get the kids out from under the roof, basically. And at that point, I didn't. I was an avid Christian, and I didn't think divorce was the thing to do. And I got a separation. And fortunately for me, he met somebody 2 months after me and asked me for a divorce.
Oh,
so
wow.
I lived alone for a couple of years with my kids. I designed and built myself a little house, and really, honestly, not interested in another relationship. And I'd seen my kids off for half the summer with their dad, and they really didn't like to go. And I was feeling, it wasn't the summer. It was in the March. It must have been Easter. And I was feeling down. So I went to the church, which was then an Episcopal church that we used to go to. And I pull in the parking lot, and a car with a Virginia license plate pulls in. And a guy gets out with a very worn Bible under his arm. And I thought, I'm going to sit near that man because he will give me a sense of peace. I later found out he was a minister from Virginia somewhere. And so I go into the church, and he's already sitting at the end of a pew. And so I excused myself and sat next to him. And on the other side of me was Henry with his 2 daughters, who that day had gone to church for the first time in 30 years.
Wow.
His girls, his mother was Catholic, his father was Protestant, and he was sitting between his parents when he was 12. And the priest in the Catholic Church read a letter from the Pope. It was the ecumenical movement. And he slammed the letter down, and he looked at the congregation and said, now, I've read the letter, and you can have your Protestant friends and go to hell with them. And my husband, once he got out from under his parents, he never went to church again. So he'd been alone with his 2 daughters. Their mother didn't want them, and they had a house in Boston and a house on the Cape, and they were on the Cape, and the girls said to him, Daddy, you always say you're going to take us to church, and you never do. And he said, well, let's go to that funny little church in the hollow. It was an old farmhouse originally. Mm-hmm. It had all beams and stuff in it. It was cute. So I sat next to him on the day when it was the first day he'd gone to church in 30 years. And he'd walked into that church, and there was a sign over the door saying, the truth will set you free. And so I asked him if he wanted to go for coffee, and we chatted briefly, and I knew he came from Boston, and I forgot about it. But then my son and his daughter, who are close in age, both enrolled in confirmation classes. So now it's sort of April, May. And I found myself, the class ran late one time, and I found myself sitting on the bench in the yard talking to Henry. And within a short time, we were both talking. I told him about Jenny's death, which I didn't talk to many people about. And he was telling me about his aunt's death, that he had a dream. He was a boy, and he had a dream that his aunt was in a sailboat going and waving as she went out. And when his mother came in the morning, he said, Aunt Fanny is dead.
Oh.
And
wow.
Turned out she was. So we found ourselves talking about that kind of thing, which you don't usually do with somebody you just met. Anyway, that was that. so then summer comes, and it's July the 4th, and my kids are with their dad, and I was alone in my little house that I'd built, and I had a carpenter at the house working, and I said, well, if anyone's looking for me, tell them I'm near the main lifeguard stand on Nauset Beach, which was packed. And I had a book of poetry, and everybody's having fun, picnics, families, music, all in, and I felt lonelier and lonelier. So I turned over, and as I looked up, there's Henry with his gray slacks and leather shoes and the yellow pages under his arm, dragging two little girls along by the surf. And he had, on the pretext of wanting a copy of the confirmation program, had gone to the church because he knew that my son's name was on there and he'd know my name.
Oh, that's
and then gone to a payphone and called the house and found out that I was on the beach. And he's saying to the girls, she must be here somewhere. And it was actually packed. So anyway, that I got up because I recognized him, and then suddenly realized I had a bikini on and felt embarrassed because I'd met him in church. But anyway,
okay. Caroline, I'm gonna pause you for just a second. What's striking me about all of this is all the serendipities that the synchronicities and everything. And Chris, just FYI, Caroline is a stunningly beautiful woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
was getting that. Actually.
I'm putting it out there. I
was understanding
this very beautiful woman. Always has been, always will be. So I'm just gonna put it out there.
Excellent.
Well, thank you.
It should be on record.
But
you haven't seen me. I'm going to be 83 next month. I feel like I'm 49. So anyway, he sat with me. He said, may I sit with you? And he sat on my towel and we talked and the girls were playing. And he said, after 20 minutes, he said, would you have dinner with me sometime? And I said, okay. I wasn't. And that I'd only been home 20 minutes. And he said, how about tonight? So we met for dinner. The next day, he introduced me to his mother, who was so thrilled that at last he was going to be with somebody who goes to church.
You met his parents the second day of meeting him?
Yes.
Wow. You guys were on the fast track.
Yeah. And then I had told him that I was going to sit in the dunes and watch a total eclipse of the moon on the Monday night. This is now Sunday when I met his mother. And he asked if he could join me. And I thought to myself, and if I ever have another relationship, he has to slay the dragon first before he wins my hand. I thought if he tries any funny business, that's it.
Right.
But it was amazing. We just sat and talked all night as the moon rose and was eclipsed, and then the sun was coming up in the morning, and we just talked. He didn't try anything. We just talked. And talked.
Beautiful. How beautiful.
That was Monday. And on Thursday, I think it was, he called me at work and said, could you work through your lunch hour and meet me at 4:00 at the pond in Nickerson State Park? And so I said, sure. And I met him, and he sat there and he sort of laid his life out. He had lost everything. He had this multi-million-dollar company in Boston, and it had all gone belly up. And he had nothing, but he had the potential to earn money. He was highly educated and all that.
Wicked smart.
And then when he was finished that, he said, will you marry me? And I said, what?
Ooh. How many days? Said, how many days in are we?
Let's see, Saturday to Thursday.
Oh.
Wow.
So I said, look, our kids haven't met yet. And so we got together when I got my kids back, and we got together for a Chinese meal. And, and I knew the guidance counselor at the middle school where my son was. I talked to him about it. He said, you'll never make it unless you all get therapy, and the kids each have to have their own therapist,
Right.
So 2 years anyway, my kids would go home to his house on the school bus, and I'd come home from work. We'd have dinner together, and then I and mine would get up and go back to my house. And we did that for 2 years.
Wow.
Took a couple of trips together, and then we got married. And the guy that he got all the information to write the book about the United Fruit Company, was our best man. And it was...
was that Tom McCann?
Yes.
Okay.
And the book was in Tom's name, but Henry did all the writing. And Tom ran off with all the credit. I think, what was it? Newsweek, some big magazine said it was the best business history written. Got a lot of accolades.
Yeah, it was.
But anyway, that's how I met Henry, and we were married, and very happily for 24.
I was going to ask, how long were you married?
Yeah.
Wow.
But part of this interview is what happened with Henry.
Yeah. Well, so the kids were all grown. My daughter had married a physician and moved to Colorado, and they, the three girls were all married, and my son was living on his own in Orleans. And that's when we had we asked all the kids to come over and said we decided to sell the house. It's too much for us to maintain, and you have the opportunity to buy it, in which, of course, none of them could afford it. And so we sold it and moved into something that we could close up and travel, easy to leave. Mm-hmm. And so that week, we'd had an absolutely wonderful week. Our best friends had come and dined with us on the deck. We'd walked hand in hand. That was Thursday. Friday, we just took a long walk and thought about all our blessings and drew up our bucket list of where we wanted to travel. And the next day he came out of the shower and threw his arms around me and said, "I love you so much. What are you doing today?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to take a walk with Susie, who was my sister-in-law, married to Henry's brother." And he said, "Well, I'm going fishing with the boys." And I said, "Well, bring me back a whole one and I'll cook it on the grill." So I went for a nice walk, and then I drove, it's a couple of miles from our house into town where we got our mail. I went to the post office, and as I left, I saw that there was a message from Henry on my phone. So I called him, and he said, "I didn't call you." Oh, he said, must have been yesterday, he said. So I said, "How are you doing?" And he said, "Well, we've got one whole one." So I said, "We'll bring it back whole.
Yay.
One bluefish, but we're going to pull the lines up and go off Nantucket." And in the time it took me to drive the 2 miles to my house, the phone, which was then on the wall, was flashing, and it was the Coast Guard saying that something grave had happened and that Henry was being taken to the hospital. And I called my daughter. I drove to the hospital as slowly as possible because I feared what I would find. And I called my daughter. Two of them were nurses, and she said, "What did they say?" And as soon as she had worked on a rescue squad too. When she heard the word grave, she knew what it meant. And she said, "Mom, give me the numbers of your two best friends." She called everybody. And by the time I got to the emergency room, friends were there. And they took me into a room and said that he had died. But they were pulling the lines up right after I spoke to him. And he was at the wheel of the boat, and he just dropped.
Wow.
So I had the gift of just speaking to him the second before he died.
Another serendipity.
Yeah, and such a great little conversation, happy conversation too.
Right.
Yeah. So that night, people came over and we made plans of what we were going to do for a funeral and everything. And that night, when everyone had left, we had a pond. We had 3 acres with a pond in the middle of the woods. I took a tent and I went out and pitched it by the pond. And I sat with Henry for the night. I don't think I slept. But I had such a sense of peace because we'd had more fun, done more things. We'd traveled to interesting places. We'd raised 4 great kids. I just felt blessed.
You said the things you needed to say.
And he died doing what he loved doing. If I could have asked him, it's like Bing Crosby died on the golf course.
Yeah, right.
And he was so smart that I can't imagine if he'd gotten old and feeble, how hard that would have been. And so I just felt grateful for the gift that I'd had, for the life that I'd lived with him.
Wow. But I just see the theme, the serendipities and they're not coincidences. I mean, there's these magical moments are so fantastic. But
And then
they just keep seeming to line up.
yes,
they're
just bing,
there.
bang, boom.
We're just too busy. We don't see them.
Sure.
They're there. I really believe it. I mean, I could, as a quick aside, in this group that I facilitate, we were talking about synchronicity, which was a term coined by Carl Jung when he was interviewing a client who was telling, had a client, he was a therapist, and she was telling him about a dream she had where there was a green scarab beetle. And as she's telling the dream, they're on the 9th floor of a building in Germany somewhere, and there's a green scarab beetle climbing up his window.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So 2 days before I had this gathering with these women where we would discuss this, I thought, well, I need to think about how I'm going to present this. And I took a walk out in the prairie here, it was February, dead grass everywhere, nothing's alive yet. And I take a little side trail. I thought, I haven't been down this one before. And out of the grass crawls an identical green scarab beetle.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's fantastic.
I could send you the pictures.
Yeah.
I mean, there weren't any insects anywhere.
Wow.
Except that guy.
So one of the things
all I say is you allow the space for stuff to show up, and it's there.
If you pay attention.
I call it holding space.
Yes.
Just sit with it and allow it to show up.
Yes.
Sure. Yep.
So
we used to call it looking for hearts. Every day you could see the shape of a heart
somewhere
in something.
Yeah.
And
in a rock or a piece of wood. Yeah.
That's new to me.
Yep, I was somebody that we used to do that all the time.
So one of the things I wanted to also bring up, and we have a little bit of limited time now, but you found love again, and you found love every time, and I think can you speak
when I
to
wasn't
that?
Looking for it.
Is that good? That's good advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, I wasn't looking for Jeff, anybody. Period.
Yep.
And here I am. I'm single again, and people have said that. They show up when they least expected. So,
I wasn't looking either when I met Henry. I wasn't looking, and when I met George, I wasn't looking. But when I met George, it was because I had come out to Colorado because my daughter was trying to get over her addiction, and I said, my mother said, whatever you do, find a church. So we're going to find you a church so that you can make new friends. And so we church shopped and walked into the Boulder Unity, and there was a sign over the door that had a cross, a menorah, a Buddha, a buffalo for the Native Americans, and everything. And her now ex was Jewish, so I thought, well, this is it, because maybe things will work out in their marriage. And I said, now you've got to sign up for a small class where you meet, 8 or 10 people and get to know them, and you become friends. And she said, well, I will if you will. So I signed up for a class to study. I don't know if you've heard of the Course in Miracles.
I've not.
No, I have not.
It's channeled, and it's thicker than the Bible and denser. And the minister had been quoting it from the pulpit. So I thought, that's interesting. So I signed up for that, only to find out that it was a year-long class.
Oh, wow.
60 people had signed up for it, and it dropped to like 25 within 3 weeks because they were looking for like a miracle, like healing your sickness or blindness or whatever, which isn't. This book talks about a miracle as being changing your perception.
Sure. Well, everybody thinks a miracle happens right now.
Right.
Right.
That's what they want.
Really, what I talked about in that article that I sent you to read. I just learned that I can change my perception if I want.
So how do you meet George?
So he was one of the facilitators.
Oh.
So for about 9 months, I just knew him as George R., facilitator. I wasn't interested. He'd been divorced for 12 years. He wasn't interested in getting married again or anything. But another guy in the group and I soon figured out that George was the smartest one. Like I'd ask a question and he'd say, don't you remember? I think it's on page 116, paragraph 3, I think.
Oh, wow.
You read this. So no matter what group they put us in, we'd scoot down to his group.
That's funny.
And so one day at coffee hour, I saw him and I said, I apologize. I hope I didn't ask too many questions. This is like 9 months now into the class. And he said, we can always get together with the books, you know. So we met at a bookstore, coffee shop at 7 in the evening, and he's all business, and he spreads the books out all over the table and talks The Course in Miracles for 3 straight hours. And they're putting chairs on the tables. It's time for you. And he said, where are you parked? And I said, I'm in the underground garage. And he said, well, I'll walk you to your car. And he leans on the car door and he said, you want to have lunch sometime? And I said, sure, okay.
Oh, nice.
Look at you go.
So we met for lunch a couple of weeks later, and he leans across the table. He says, so what brings you to Boulder? I mean, I'd known him for 9 months. He knew absolutely nothing about me, but I knew his mind.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, it also says...
I told him, well, this is the thing. So I told him that, the story of how I got to Boulder and how Henry and I had drawn up our bucket list of where we wanted to travel. And he said, well, what was your number one place? And I said, Machu Picchu in Peru. And he slammed his fist on the table and he said, that's my screensaver. I've always wanted to go.
Oh,
and it's an amazing place. I was just there last spring, actually almost a year ago to...
We've now been twice. So I said, let's go. And so 4 months later, I figured I'd either hate him or we'd get along. We went. And so I moved in maybe a year and a half later. I moved in with him. And I'd been there maybe 8 months. And he said, I am the marrying kind. And I said, well, okay, let's get married.
Oh, my. That's fantastic. Well,
Yeah.
So there's hope. There's hope for people after loss that they do find love again.
Yes, but it's not looking for it. That's all I can say is, I do believe that if you're looking, you put off an energy that puts people off.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good. So kind of like just go about your business.
Get on with your life,
Yeah.
and then allow it to show up.
Oh, that's great advice.
I would agree with that.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
I would absolutely agree with that.
Well, Caroline, this has been wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
And true to form, I don't think we've covered it all. And Chris laughs at me because I always invite our guests to come back again because I know we haven't covered it all.
We haven't.
Have been delightful and so insightful and so helpful. So I want to invite you back another time.
I would love to.
We'll make that happen. And what do you want to leave us with today? What else could you tell us?
In terms of grief,
grief, life,
the universe.
Yeah.
You choose.
It's like that poem that at the end of the article that I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
That I saw a wonderful book by Marcus Bach called The Power of Perception. And the poem is, oh, let my eyes be opened wide that I may clearly see how often in another's guise God walks the road with me. And it's not, it's not just that. It's like we were talking about, stuff shows up. We don't have the time, but I could tell you my Moroccan chicken story, which is even more amazing than the scarab beetle story.
Okay.
So, it's so to me that is, it's interesting. Maybe I'll copy, with this women's group, you might find out where I'm coming from these days. I email them in between. We meet every 2 weeks.
Right.
A month. And maybe I'll copy you on some of the emails, and which might give you an idea of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. I love it.
I can always, and I've been people are always begging me to write a book because I have so many stories to tell.
And you should. Caroline, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I've loved catching up with you. And I think I'm going to, I need to call you again and talk to you more. So.
Yeah, this is fantastic to meet you, Caroline. And this is some great.
Nice to meet you, Chris. Thanks
You've
for
led an amazing life.
And I hope that what I've said is helpful to somebody.
It is.
It absolutely is.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care.
Yep.
Thank you. Wow, Chris, that was amazing. I just loved listening to Caroline.
Oh, yeah. Well, number one, I like the British accent.
Yeah,
It makes you sound so much smarter.
And I'm not joking.
So much smarter than you.
I'm not. Oh, geez. All right. But I'm not joking. When I met her, she's just this very beautiful woman. And what that interview tells me, she isn't just beautiful on the outside, she's beautiful on the inside. And that is so wonderful. And the life that she's led, she could be bitter and angry, but she's not.
Right. I mean, she has a right to be bitter and angry.
I mean, totally full of hope. And
she chose not to be.
Right. And I love the advice about, that there's love again, that you do it. And, but oddly enough, it happens when you're not looking for it.
Well, and I think that's the best part of her message and her story is don't look for anything. Just live your life. Do the things that you want to be able to do. And along the way, you'll pick up the people you need in your life. It's sort of like the Wizard of Oz. Dorothy didn't know where she was going. She was just doing her thing to get to the Oz, and every step of the way, she picked up somebody that was helpful to her.
Yeah.
And
a good analogy.
And how many movies are like that? But I mean, that story holds true to life, regardless of the format that the story takes.
Right. But I also think you need to be aware of what's the people around you that are coming into, like I mentioned in the interview about we need to be little satellite dishes about who's around us and listen so we do get that richness from people.
Oh, right. And I mean, I almost made a huge mistake because I wasn't picking up on the information coming into my satellite because I was just doing my thing. But so there's balance. You've got to be just doing your thing, not looking,
right?
But you also have to be open to what is around you.
I wish we could harness it, because like the other day,
that would be our $100 idea.
Wouldn't it be great?
Yeah.
I bet we could make $100.
I bet we could.
No, I was talking about a friend the other day, a conversation like a day or two ago, and I went and dropped off some dry cleaning, and that guy walked in. The guy had been talking about the day before.
Yeah,
hadn't seen him in months. I wish we could harness that.
Right.
I mean, how fantastic. But and that's with money. That's with love. That's with just people.
Life in general.
Yeah. So I think I just enjoyed this conversation, and of course, we'll have her back.
Of course we will.
Absolutely.
So yeah. But anyway, another great interview and we just keep finding these people just keep coming to us. Again, we're doing our thing and they keep coming to us. So
they're appearing.
They are
to us.
So I hope everybody listening is enjoying these. I'm still getting lots of great messages and talking to people. Had lunch with a friend from high school that I hadn't seen since high school the other day. And it's because he listened to couple of our episodes and we talked for a couple hours about some of the stuff and it was great.
Fantastic.
So please, if you get out to Forward Wellness for Caregivers.com. Send us a message. Let us know, what you're thinking, what you're feeling, or if you have ideas for the show or any of that kind of thing. So Forward Wellness for, the word for, not the numeral, Forward Wellness for Caregivers.com. Let us know. And we'll see you all next week.
Absolutely.